Hello, my name's Jade and today we will be discussing Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs. The third and final book in the Miss Peregrine's trilogy. Although it's now a series, I think there's 2 other books out, so I guess it's not really the third and final book in the Miss Peregrine's trilogy. But it was. This might also be my favourite of the trilogy. I think the first book was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children and the second book was Helloo City. I have videos for both of these up. I'll link them both down below. This one I think was the most fun. Like, it had such a cool adventure vibe to it, which makes me want to say that this one was my favourite. I think I just have more respect for this one. I think it has the strongest plot and it was well written and it was just so epic. There's so much epicness going on with this one that it's really hard for me to deny it a better rating than Helloo City, even though I think Helloo City is the most fun. I don't even remember what I gave the first one. I think I gave Helloo City like a 7.5 out of 10, and I think I'd give Library of Souls like an 8 out of 10. A lot of the problems I had with Helloo City I had again with Library of Souls. The writing didn't feel so detached in this one for me. I think I'm finally starting to get used to it a little bit. I'm starting to have more respect for Jacob as a narrator and how realistic he is and how self-aware he is. And so I think that helped my appreciation for Library of Souls a lot. So kind of the immatureness going on, it feels like a children's a lot of the time, and that's not a bad thing, but it's not a children's. These are supposed to be 16-year-olds and they didn't feel 16 a lot of the time to me. Some of the things some of the adults say and sometimes the way they act feels a little off to me. I'm very aware that these are my problems. Like, this isn't, I think, a standard view of these books. Very much aware that it's not the book's fault, I don't think. I think it's a me thing. I hate how low the ratings are because I love the world so much. I love the way he's gone about with the world building. Everything's so mysterious still. It gives you the right amount of information. The power system and all of the mythology and everything. It's just really cool, and the weirdness and the quirkiness and the creepiness of it all. I love it so hard. I admire the crap out of these books. I want to give them a higher rating, but I just didn't feel strongly enough while reading them, I guess. And I'm going to like his writing more and more, so I'm wondering if come the time I read the newest installments, if I'll love them even more than I loved this original trilogy. Apparently the photographs in the newer ones are in full colour, and I'm so excited about this. Of course, the covers for these are gorgeous. I have to mention it again quickly. I love the whole aesthetic. It's actually particularly special. Look at Addison down there. Oh, I love this. This like makes me want to well up every time I look at it. One of these two is my favourite. This one I think looks really pretty. Also admire the heck out of this one because it's so obscure. Like, you have to look closely to see what's going on, and it's so curious looking and it fits the story so well. And I love all of this little detailing with this design that they have, and it's written in crayon. So excited to get the next one just so I can like add to my collection of these books. I believe that's all for the non-spoilery section. If you've yet to read Library of Souls, I recommend you leave now because I'm about to talk in spoilery details about what goes on in this book. So we open up right where we left off in Helloo City in the phone booth with Addison and Emma. The train has just left. It's confirmed that all the other peculiars are on the train. They're all gone. And we open with him trying to control the hologas, and he talks about how he has to like relax into the pain. His arc of learning to control the hologas was so great. When he falls into the pit of them all asleep and he wakes up and he can control them all, it's like he's in their minds. It was so triumphant feeling. It's so great to watch him really hone in on his powers and how his powers are so much stronger than we could ever have imagined that they were. Not only can he see them and he can kill them, but he can now control them, and then come the end of this book he can control a whole horde of them at one given time, and he can establish this connection with them. I loved how he kind of felt sympathy for his first one. It was a really interesting dynamic, and I don't know if we're ever going to see that first one again. I hope we do. I felt connected to it. And Emma was a little bit frustrating in regards to his powers at the time because she would talk about it as if it was easy and he just wasn't trying hard enough. Emma, you don't know. You're not him. Like, she can like set fire to things, it seems, pretty easily. Your power seems a lot easier to control than his. So back off a second, okay? Give him a minute. And it's also really interesting how he has to like establish a connection with them first. And it seems that he does something in his sleep, like when he woke up in Helloo City and he had his hand on one of the Helloo's heads, and then that's the one he has has this connection to. And then he fell asleep with a bunch of them, and then he woke up just being able to control them all. How scary was it when he woke up and he was the Hollow? I just kept waiting for him to wake up, and that wasn't it. It was so cool, and I didn't see that coming. So I'm assuming when he was asleep there's something happened. It'd be good if he could learn to control that so that he can control them at will. We were in the train station for a while. Things kind of felt, again, somewhat slow in the fact that it took a while to move from thing to thing. The chapters were really long, and I'm not the biggest fan of long chapters. I think they make the story move a lot slower, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think this has happened with all three of the books. They kind of have this slowness to them. It works really well for the story. It can make it feel a little bit dense at times, and would spend ages just in Jacob's head, like a few pages at a time, just of all of his thoughts, and that isn't my favorite either. Learn more about the loops. That was something that was flushed out. I don't know if he'd had feedback from Hollow City being like, we're confused, what's going on, or whether he just like noticed that he hadn't fleshed it out enough. So quite a few times we talk about aging forward in this one. You have to spend like a good few days beyond your time before it will actually catch up to you. Fiona, we think, died, which is really upsetting to me. Like, I don't like the fact that we lost any of our group. I want all of our group to stay together, and I felt bad for Hugh because he kept saving the day at the last minute. Like, even at the end with Cool, his bees helped. I hope we find her. I hope she's still alive. I loved it when they're in the present day. The people around them like looked really odd, and he was like, is everyone peculiar? Are we in some weird future? Is this not actually the present? And he was like, nope, just nerds. So we go to Devil's Acre, is it called? With Sharon. I'm so glad he was a bigger role. I really enjoyed him. And they talk about how normals get trapped in these loops. And I forgot about that from the first one. And again, I feel bad for these normals. Like, this is morally questionable. They don't get a life outside of the loop. I don't like that. We learn more about Emma's past. Someone tried to capture her, and they like kidnap these peculiars and then sell them. Weird. It was interesting to see this like corrupt side of peculiardom. The woman that they were talking to about it, though, she did genuinely seem to not want to be doing what she was doing. And we have the whole thing with Ambrosia, which it turns out is like pieces of peculiar souls, and these people willingly take it to fight bears and to strengthen their abilities for a short period of time, and then they get addicted to it. It's just all very strange. I didn't like it when they split up with Sharon. I thought we should have trusted him. Like, I didn't see what he would get out of hurting them, and honestly, he could have given them over. The fact that he didn't, you're gonna reward him, I think we can trust him, made me very nervous when they went off on their own. Oh my god, there was that crazy man who knew who Jacob was and was like, yeah, we've heard about you, heard you've been coming, the one who can control hollows. How did he know about Jacob? I'm assuming Bentham's just been like ranting and raving to everyone like someone's coming. I loved the bridgeheads. They were hilarious. We have that little scuffle outside of their tower, and I didn't like how they underestimated the tower just because it wasn't like scary looking. Like, guys, you know the whites, you know they're not to be underestimated. Jacob picked up Addison a couple of times. I was like, is he not a boxer? I thought he was a boxer, but then he does say it like towards the end that he's a boxer. How was Jacob carrying? Boxers are heavy and chunky. They're like muscly. They're muscly dogs. So I don't see how Jacob, this 16-year-old weak kid, can just like keep picking him up and running with him. Mr. Bentham was described as waiting for an old man who can talk to hollows. We know that's Abe, and Mr. Bentham knew that was Abe. So I don't know why Nim said that. He was waiting for Jacob. Why was he expecting Jacob to be an old man? Of course, the house is like this panloopticon, and we learn about interloop travel, which was really exciting. And I like how there's like one place that has like a bunch of different loops. You just need to get to that one. Obviously, it's not necessarily easy to get to that one place because you have to go to the Devil's Acre loop in London. But then from there, you can go to all these different kinds of places. It'd be nice if we could just like pick that up and put it somewhere more accessible. And I wonder now that without Bentham, if we're still going to be able to learn to control that and kind of how to manipulate it for our own purposes, if we can recreate it someone else essentially, and if we can continue to build new connections to new loops. I really want there to be like a database of all the different loops that exist. Is that a thing, or do we just have to go around kind of finding them all? You'd think there'd be a date, like the Imbrams would have one to keep track of one another. And it was so weird how Mr. Bentham knew Abe, and then even more so he was like, you must be Emma, Abe talked about you. It's just weird. It's weird. Does Jacob ever acknowledge how weird it is? I don't think he does. Like, Emma certainly doesn't. She doesn't see anything wrong with it. And when she like meets Frank at the end and she's like, yes, I'm a friend of your son, but also a friend of your father's. He's older than him. It's weird. We learn about Abaddon and the Library of Souls. There's all this history behind it and the war behind it, and that's the true goal of the whites, so that they could become more powerful and to overthrow the Imbrams. Very cool. Talk about them. So frustrating. It should no longer be ruled by a woman. Make peculiardom great again. It's sickening to listen to him. And that was their true motive the whole time, because that felt so much more real, I think, and them wanting to live forever. Everything we know about gods is based on the wars between peculiardom. Was there like a peculiar who had like a hammer and could control lightning then? Hey, what happened to that guy from Hollow City who I liked, Mr. White? Did he ever come back into play, or was he actually cool? What happened with him? He was cool. We learn that Bentham is Miss Peregrine's brother, and the gasp that came out of my mouth, everything just clicking together so well, and that Bentham sabotaged Cool and his followers, and that's how they became Hollows. Like, he kind of knew that would happen. I don't know if he knew they would become Hollows, but he knew that the loop would break down, pull up half of Siberia. And he also had a hand in creating Ambrosia. I don't really remember how. Very morally ambiguous character throughout the whole thing, and I did wonder, like, was that his true goal? Was he always going to betray them? Miss Peregrine says that he was an opportunist and he just kind of did what he could in the time. Come the end, I think he realised what he was doing was wrong. I liked him. I wanted to think of him as a good guy, and it frustrated me when he gave in to Cool. I think he's just frustrated that he got shipped off Raiders and no one was believing him, that he didn't mean to do what he did. I'm so glad that they saved the cub bears as well after the Hollow fight. That made me very happy. And that Hollow fight was really cool. I know what we're gonna do. I'm gonna fake his death. Dun dun dun. I loved the Grim Bears just in general, and PT. Oh, how he saved them from the parrot bomb. They had an interesting conversation with Mother Dust, who was also a very interesting character, and I love how selfless she was. And come the end, when Miss Peregrine was like, she's a very stubborn woman. She's going around healing all of these minor injuries. Is she just gonna end up like a head and a torso? Like, when will she stop this? Anyway, they had this conversation about how they didn't think controlling holocasts was Jacob's true power. It's just like a side effect of his true power, and that Emma's true power wasn't really controlling fire. And Emma was like, well, how come we can't all control holocasts then? It seems like a pretty useful thing to be able to do. And he was like, yeah, but your power won't be able to manipulate in that way. So what are their true powers then? This is, I feel like a peculiardom conspiracy theory. I wonder if that's going to be explored more later on. Finally, go into the tower. Everything had been leading up to, and it was earlier in the book than I thought it would be, but then we did spend a while just kind of looking around trying to get our bearings. It annoyed me when Cole was speaking to them over the speaker thing, and how Jacob was like, yeah, I can control two at once. Jacob, you can. Why would you say that if you don't think you can? If you think you can and you say it, that's fine. And like, I love this new confidence thing, how like Emma has confidence in him, and that's all he needs. He just needs confidence in himself. Great, love that. But let's not rush into things now. Jacob and Emma, they're just like, they're Gryffindor through and through, and it annoys the hell out of me. Well, I don't know if they actually are Gryffindor. I don't know. I think Emma is. They have that Gryffindor trait to them though, and it's very frustrating. Addison came and saved the day. I love Addison so much. He's one of my favorite characters. I really hope he comes back. Of course, we finally see Miss Peregrine, and she stopped Jacob from taking the ambrosia. I loved that scene. Again, I'd like to mention how horrifying it was when he fell asleep with them and he woke up and he didn't know how much time had passed. Just this section in general was very exciting. Perplexus Anonymous comes back into play, the guy whose name is written on the front of Hollow City. Remember I talked about how I didn't really know why he was on the front? Turns out he's the guy that did the map of days. I must have forgotten that. Still don't see why he's on the front of the second book, but sure. I loved how Miller was just like a fanboying over him constantly, was like, I'll be damned if this man ages forward. And I just loved their little time together. They're all reunited finally. Been a long book and a half to get here. His little speech was really sweet and heartfelt, and I loved the scarf interaction. Obviously we now know that it was the wool that was like bulletproof, and it's crazy to think that it's only been a couple weeks since the beginning of the first book. How little time has passed, especially in these last two books. They take place in a matter of like days, like a week has gone by maybe. It's crazy. And he's constantly thinking about old Jacob versus new Jacob, and I really think we need him to kind of just combine the two and come to peace with that he's neither of them, he's both of them, and he can be both of them at once. I did find all of those sections really interesting to read about though. And then we have the fight, and it was so cool, and then the Horde of the Whites came in, and Petey and Bentham came in, and it was just so epic to read about. Oh, I loved that section. Sharon caught the stragglers outside as well. I love how everyone was just coming together. It was just so epic, and I wasn't expecting it, and I'm so glad we got it. Seeing him control 12 holocasts is what I wanted, and it was so cool. And then of course everything goes to hell because Bentham catches Miss Peregrine. I think maybe his injury also had something to do with it. He probably wanted to be stronger because his legs couldn't work anymore, and I can see how it can be frustrating for him when he feels like he didn't do anything, obviously provided that he didn't actually do anything wrong, which we know he kind of didn't because he had Abe's soul, so he wasn't completely morally clean. But I can see how he'd be frustrated and that he's been injured and he's been locked away for years and years and he can't really continue his research. But I was thinking about it for a while, like, was this his plan all along? Did we find the Library of Souls? And I suspected this when we first learned about the Library of Souls and that we needed a librarian to see the souls. I was like, well, Jacob can see hollows, and I bet he can also see the souls. And I can't remember when this was brought up. Did Cole mention at some point that he thought Jacob could be the one to see the souls, or did Bentham bring up that Cole thinks Jacob can see the souls? And then it just kind of happened. No one kind of was like, oh wow, what, you can see them, really? Like, it felt like everyone knew that he would be able to, but no one acknowledged that they all knew he would be able to. Did I miss something there? And then Cole shot Jacob and I'm just freaking out, and he's like talking about things and observing things. I'm like, how are you so aware and so calm if you've been shot? You consumed this crazy soul, and he's like big and he was telekinetic as well, wasn't he? Very scary stuff. And then I love Jacob's line about the cavalry coming and Addison bark and they could hear him, and Sharon and his cousins are there. It was so great. Of course, my disgust at Bentham for consuming Abe's soul. Such a weird situation, and I can only imagine how angry and upset and horrified Jacob would feel in that moment of like watching someone consume your grandfather's soul. Of course, we find out he wasn't actually shot. He has the scar. If he wasn't shot, then why was he so weak? Was it just from his wound? His like bite wound that was bleeding out? And then the force of the bullet just like knock him off of his feet and take him a while to recover, I guess? Because it felt very much like he got shot. He was very much man down. Thank God for Horace though. And it was so sweet when we reunited afterwards, and he's like, I'm just so glad it worked. And then Bentham takes the salt, and it's like these two titans, these two giant monsters fighting, and I could just like see it so clearly. And I'm so sad that I don't think we're gonna get any more movies, because I think this one would make a really cool film. And so they collapsed the loop, and it was kind of this weird full circle thing about that's how all these whites and hollows were created, and that's how we're ending it as well. So I'm assuming we can no longer access the Library of Souls that has now been cut off because we've cut off the loop towards it. Or are there more? I think there'd be multiple loops to get there because it's such like a powerful place. But also, I don't think they need to be able to access it. I think it's fine that we can't. Really, it's for people coming into this world and coming out of the world. I wonder where it's located, if it's located actually on Earth or some other weird place. It seems like some weird ancient time. It's just so epic and cool. The last third of this book I particularly loved. Like everything from when Jacob woke up with the hollows to the end was just like my favourite. I loved it all so much. He mentions bird helpers quite a few times, and it's so fun to watch him becoming one of them, like thinking about Imbrims in this way, and the way he was so skeptical at first, then coming out of Library of Souls, he thinks like one of them. Bentham's assistant is noted that we couldn't find him, and I forgot about him. I did feel sorry for Nim, who's running around like, Master would never. I wonder what's going to become of him. But his assistant is gone, and the fact that he's missing would suggest that something's up there. And like Emma said, he must have had like a confidant, an Igor of sorts, like someone on his side. So I wonder if he's going to come into play in the future, because it feels like he could. I hope the assistant does come into play again. I think that would be a nice overarching thing that we could explore. And when we have that really hard conversation in the closet, and it's hard because they're right, Jacob's so young, he can't commit to anything for the rest of his life yet. And I think his solution of finishing high school, doing a year or two of college, and then going back at it from an adult would be better to do, and then he can commit to the peculiar life. It's hard to read about their back and forth. He says he doesn't ultimately want to live in a loop for the rest of his life, but as soon as Emma's like, you're right, you shouldn't do this, he wants to take it all back and be like, no, I'd rather live with her forever. I'll say goodbye to my parents in an instant. It's hard. I don't like that section. And Miss Peregrine kind of gave him that intimidating talk, like the big brother talk. It's hard because obviously he loves his parents, but they didn't seem to understand him, and it just feels like he belongs there more than anywhere else. And he keeps talking about how they're his family, and he can learn more about his powers, and he can help them. He's so useful to them. Are there any more hollows now that exist, or any more whites? Did any escape? All the hollows and whites should be dead now, so will his power be useful anymore? Actually, come to think about it, I guess that's why that wasn't his true power. Was his true power to see the souls? So seeing the hollow gas was just a side effect of that. Jacob chooses to not wipe his parents' memory. It felt like cheating, which I get, but it made me very nervous. And then that whole section afterwards was really hard to read about, like him struggling to adjust back to normal life and all these like PTSD type symptoms, because it did happen in such a short period of time. And then he's going back to therapy. When they stole his letters, I was just so frustrated and nervous, and then they chose to ship him off to a clinic, and like having just come out of the Maradara series, I'm like, we're here again, really? Which is really hard because he basically given everything up come that stage, and his last plea to Emma sending an email. Oh, speaking of the letters, Emma sent one that had some interesting stuff like about Bentham. Those wax people weren't actually wax people, which makes him seem even more dodgy of a character, and they were actually peculiars that they suspected he was going to use to try and power his machine. What were they using to power it before? Because they had it working. I'm presuming it wasn't a hollow gas, so I'm presuming they were already using peculiars to power it. How can peculiars power it? Like, how have they figured out the science behind that? And also with the whole clinic situation, we were so close to the end. It was so scary. I didn't understand how it was going to wrap up and work within like the next couple pages. But of course, Miss Peregrine and all the kids come to his rescue, and I loved it. Emma got his electronical letter, and his mother was just like freaking out. I've had a feeling that I wasn't the biggest fan of his mother in the first book, that I liked his dad, but I didn't like his mother. I can't remember why. I'm starting to get those vibes again. And they all like displayed their powers, and it was just such a nice note to end on. They're not living in fear of aging forward anymore, because when the loop was destroyed, it reset all of their clocks. For now, at least they're visiting Jacob, and I'm pretty sure the next book, you know, it takes place in America, so I'm assuming they stay for at least a while. I mean, being that their old loop is destroyed, where else would they go other than Devil's Acre, which is a punishment loop, so I'm thinking they probably don't want to stay there. So this whole breaking down of the loops really is like a fountain of youth. Bentham was kind of right, like that's not what he meant to do. And they agree that they're gonna just start dating like normal people. She took my hand, leaned towards me, and kissed me on the cheek. Now that we have time. And it occurred to me, standing there, just breathing with her, quite settling around us, that those might be the three most beautiful words in the English language. We have time. And we ended with this picture. It was such like a great end. It was such a great ending as the last book, as the last third, and as the very end. And I think that's why this is ultimately my favourite so far. I teared up at that end. I think some of the section in this book could have been condensed a little bit. Such a satisfying ending. Of all the endings I read, this is up there with one of the best ones in terms of how satisfying of an ending it is. If it stayed a trilogy, I think it definitely would be one of my favourite ends of a trilogy. Of course, it's not actually the end, but like I was reading with the view knowing that this was designed to be an end when it first came out, and it feels like one. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a peculiar morning, afternoon, evening / time. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye! You just get... Do you like my mug? It's a cauldron. It has an eye on it, which I didn't realise when I bought it, but that's okay.